Everybody. And it's a real delight to have back Andrew with us, Andrew Cook. And he's going to be talking about how we walk on this earth, and particularly how we've developed habits of not walking lightly and how we can begin to walk lightly again and not so much on our heels, I think. So I'm really looking forward to this talk,
Yes,
Andrew.
that's right.
It should be very, very interesting because I'm probably a slightly habitual heel walker myself. So,
As we all are, yes.
as we all are. Well, most of us, yes. Probably not the Maasai warriors in Africa, who seems
No,
to
definitely not.
have an extraordinarily lithe way of walking, don't they? Amazing.
Wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great. All right. So, do you want to say anything about yourself before we start, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. Yes. So, my name's Andrew Cook. I've been practicing craniosacral therapy now for 30 years this year, and along the way, and I used to do a lot of qigong. I had a qigong practice for years, with a guy called Zhijing Wang, who's in London. He's a Taoist master, and actually this actually came out of a really extended period of qigong, which so the origins of what I'm going to teach here are go back, crikey, 30 years or something like that. I used to go on a qigong camps with Davrik Leggett and Brad Rishkur. I don't know if you've come across
No, I don't know them. No.
So they're down in Devon, so it was a 10-day camp at one point. So you're doing these intensive qigong things, and so a basic qigong exercise is bouncing on the feet. And what you do is you have straight legs. Um, um, One thing I see a lot of is people have got this idea of Tai Chi as being the kind of this soft sort of droopy thing where you have bent knees, and so they try and walk with their knees kind of bent and soft. And actually, Tai Chi is a martial art. So if you it is not soft at all, uh, um, except that the softness allows for speed, and to be hidden. Okay. And so if the legs are bent and you are not in this very powerful engaged horse riding stance, then there is no support from the body. So if you're going to do a exercise, actually, you need the legs straight. So there's a qigong exercise where you stand with straight legs. You then bounce on your heels very, very lightly, and you very, very quickly. So essentially, you're putting vibration through the body, and at the same time, you release the joints in the fingers and feet, which releases energy to move through all of the channels. And qigong's quite interesting, because once you start to get to that opening of the joints, it's starting to get almost into the kind of the lines that you get in polarity therapy more than the meridians. There's a lot of energetic crossover once you get into this the Shen style of qigong. So anyway, we did this bouncing, and for about 45 minutes at a time. If you've ever tried it, like if you're not used to this sort of exercise, once you do it for more than, I don't know, a minute, the calves start to ache.
Yeah.
So basically, you got to get through this pain barrier, and the idea is you're constantly looking for the buoyancy. So once you start to bounce, then it begins to release this buoyancy in the body. And the first effect when that kicks in is there's a feeling of lightness, and then the feet start to feel almost like they've got sort of diving boots on, and you've also got this lightness. So essentially, you've created this alchemical separation of air and earth. Yeah. And then this lightness kind of progresses to the point where your body feels like it actually wants to jump instead of it just being bouncing. It actually start to jump, and then that might calm down, and so you do this sort of regularly. And one of the things that happened to me was at one point I felt my whole structure realigning itself around that forward balance point.
Hmm.
And it was actually kind of one of those kind of moments of enlightenment because I actually felt the it's an interesting experience, is that there's the rightness of that forward balance position, and I started to use it more and more when I was walking around. So I mean, this is before all the barefoot running kind of became
Yeah.
popular. So for the last 30 years, I've been walking around, and what I found, the first thing was I found I had to relax my ankles in order to kind of walk and have more of a forward foot engagement. So that has actually been my qigong practice for ever since I
Mhm.
stopped doing kind of this
Mm.
mainstream thing. I still do this, and and it's interesting. It's not so easy if you wear shoes with heels, but I don't like wearing shoes without heels so much because if you're on like a pavement, a hard surface, actually it's still whatever you do, it still impacts your foot unless you
Yeah.
are literally walking on the front of the foot. And um, if you look at kind of drawings from, say, the medieval period when people say about 400 years ago there was a change in shoe design and we started to have shod shoes with hard soles, these sort of thick, very thick layers of cowhide sewn together. And before then, people essentially wore leather socks, and so they couldn't ram their heels on the ground because they'd damage their feet. And so what they did was they used to kind of walk on the front of the feet, and it looks a little bit mincy, you kind of you end up it's almost like walking like a dancer. So
Mm.
if you look at images from the period of Chaucer, um, then you see people with their feet pointed forwards, and it's easy to think this is just artistic, it's license. But actually, no, that's how they were walking with the front of the foot down. So it was a very graceful kind of walk.
Mm.
And once you get into that forward foot, then the body settles into a different balance. And it is actually more like dancing. So you see a professional dancer, and this is how they're moving when they're dancing. They're
Mm.
they're actually on the front of the foot, and the balance point's different. And of course, the biomechanics are all different as well once you get on the front of the foot. So I got quite interested in this, and I started to look a lot at the biomechanics, and then they all made sense. Um, and then I guess probably 15 years ago, um, I went and I made a little film of this. I've got a friend who's a film producer, and he set up a studio in Germany. So I went across to Berlin, and we did this film. We got three people who offered their bodies to be filmed, and we did this, and then it was just so much hassle going from that stage to anything that would be a production. It just kind of all got dropped. So this is kind of like a little sideline that's been running alongside everything else I do, and
Mm.
it's never really been aired. So I've still got the film material, um, um, but as I say, getting from that to a something
Mm.
that's of presentable quality
Mm. Mm.
from the raw is a surprising amount of work.
Oh, it is.
Um, so what I've got today is a set of slides I've started to put together, and um, yeah, what else on this? Yeah, another interesting point. I worked my previous job before I was a craniosacral therapist was I was a hydrogeologist, and I worked in Oman for a while. And you kind of think of the Arab states as being kind of, really rich, but actually there's a lot of incredibly poor people living in them. So you go into the kind of the desert fringes, and there's people living almost as they used to kind of in medieval times still. It's not quite that. You know, a man was still medieval kind of back in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
Totally. Literally, they had one radio set in the whole country and no vehicle, one vehicle, which was the Sultans and whatever, and that was it. And then people used to have like a 4-day camel journey from the interior to the coast in which they might die and at any time and with goatskin bottles. So that was the 70s, you know, it's not that long ago. So I worked with people who'd done this. And they took us, it's interesting because they took us to all these little really remote places where some people were still living almost like they did kind of back in the 70s. And I remember going to one place and they were in mountains and there was very, very rough rock. And so they'd made these shoes, and the shoes were just to basically run up mountains. And they weren't shoes, they were just little wads of felt, kind of, so it was about an inch thick felt with a set of strings attached. So these things would go on the ball of the foot. And then the person would sprint up these very, very sharp rocks wearing these kind of little wads of felt just on the ball of the feet. So it's quite interesting, you know, wherever you go, where people don't have our kinds of shoes, and that's how they go. So this is why you have so many really good marathon runners who come from kind of Somalia and Kenya and Ethiopia, because like you know, once you go out into the sticks there, a lot of kids grow up with no shoes, so they learn to run on the front of the feet. They never learn to sort of sit back on the heels. And yeah, so it's a very, very different way of moving. So yeah, shall we go to the slides?
Yeah. I've got a few questions, but let's do them. I want to see what you've got. No. Let's see what you've got first, and you might cover this. I don't want you to repeat it. So
okay, so I need share. Oh no, the share host is disabled. Share. So someone will have to.
Oh, I'll do that for you.
Yeah. Share thing out.
Do that.
Okay, and I'll.
Are you all right then? No, I can't see that.
No, and I need to. I need to share that now. There we go. Okay, and I'll whiz through these fairly quickly. What have we got? About probably 25 minutes or something like that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
All right then. So yeah, change in shoe design. So there's a few. Yes. So this set of slides, there's a few pictures being removed just for copyright reasons because I can't. You know, there are limits to what I can put on here.
Andrew, if you go to start, if you go to slideshow and start, then it should come up full screen for us.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Right then. So, oh yeah, so Stefan was the guy who did all of the filming with me. That was. Yeah, we finished just when there was this enormous snowstorm, and so it took me 2 days to get back from Germany. There were people shuffling all over Europe trying to get back to the various countries, and that was I could talk half an hour about that. Okay, so there we go. So the shoe design led to major pathologies, compressed lumbar discs and back pain. I'll show you the reason for that when we get to the anatomical drawings. And it also leads to psychological issues. So if you walk on your heels, so it leads to lack of confidence and overwhelm, because if you kind of think of it, if you know, there's this thing about, are we going forwards in the world or are we leaning back away from it? And so if you sit back on the heels, you've actually retreated a little bit from the world. If your stance is if your balance point is slightly forwards, you are going forwards. And of course, if you look at someone who's standing more forwards, it tends to be interpreted as more of an aggressive posture, but it doesn't have to be quite so extreme that it's aggressive. And if you see somebody really standing back and leaning back, they're more on their heels. Yeah, that's a more defensive thing. There you go. It's in the language. So So the fact that as a society and a culture we tend to stand more on the heels actually puts everyone on this slightly on their back foot sort of psychological position. And So it's actually worth cultivating a forward foot stance. It's not as straightforward as just buying yourself a set of barefoot shoes, because if you've walked on your heels all your life, converting back again is not simple, because it's not just changed the way your feet are engaging, it's changed the whole balance and the way that you engage every single muscle in your body. So it is not a simple thing converting back again. So I actually don't recommend people go out and get barefoot shoes and just start to walk in them in the middle of in a town. It's not a good idea. You can actually end up damaging your feet and ankles and knees. So you actually need to build up strength in the feet to start off with. Um, so you look at young children and they naturally go to this balance point. So you look at them and they tend to be on the front of their feet. You look at the toddlers on the right, and their balance is forwards. Okay. And you look at children running around and they are weightless. They have this wonderful weightless quality of movement because they actually literally that's how they feel. They don't feel heavy. Their experience of being in a body is in something that's quite light. And so you get dancers, skiers, boxers, martial artists, horse riders, gymnasts, all sorts of people who use their body a lot actually go to the front of the foot. And it's a much more dynamic kind of place to move from. And you can see again the horse rider. You see the balance point. The stirrups go on the ball of the foot, and then there's this slight kind of curve at the groin crease, and the groin crease is the critical point in all of this. If that's not right, then everything else doesn't work. So the angle of the groin crease makes or breaks this. And Reich did a whole of Reichian psychotherapy is based on sort of sexuality and the use of all those muscles in the pelvis. So I think there's a really big link here between kind of the way that we move and all of there is a really big link between the way that we move, this way that we engage the ground, and all of that Reichian kind of sexual psychotherapy material. It's quite strongly connected. So you can approach it from different directions. And of course, Alexander approached it from the neck. It was like, how do we get the neck joint right? And then the rest of the body follows. Well, that's kind of a top down. So he was saying basically you get the neck right, and then the rest of the body sort of then hangs off the head a little bit. And coming from a Tai Chi and Qigong point of view, I kind of go, well, you've got to get the foundation right. And once you get the foundation right, then the rest links together and that support then goes up the body. To me, that's more logical, but I'm certainly not dissing Alexander technique because that was the first alternative therapy I ever had, and I had some amazing things with that, really very powerful. But this goes in a similar direction from the base rather than from the top. Okay, so yeah, it's a whole body alignment that we're looking at. Every single muscle in the body engages in a different way to a different degree compared to standing on the heels, and particularly the lower legs. So most people who walk around on their heels, they're not actually engaging the muscles in the lower legs anywhere near as much as you would if you were using the front of the feet. So most people may, even if you do bodybuilding and whatever, most people walking around in the UK have underdeveloped muscles in the lower legs compared to the rest of the body. So this is one of the reasons you can't just start off doing barefoot walking. You have to develop the strength of the muscles in the feet and lower legs to the point at which they are similar to the strength of the muscles in the rest of your body, and then you're ready to take that a little bit further. And you know, you can find out how strong those muscles are just by kind of, you know, you do a calf lift, but you do it very quickly. So you're kind of doing bang, 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 bang with the heels very lightly on the floor, see how long you last. If you get past a couple of minutes, you're doing really well. When you get up to 20 minutes, then yeah, then that's probably about right. Okay, so yes, it's a different quality of movement. Right, so here we go. Yeah, so it's not, this isn't a therapy, okay, but it's a core principle. And I integrate this actually into my practice quite a lot. And it's surprisingly useful. A lot of a lot of problems I see coming in, particularly lower back problems with people who are doing manual work, come back to them actually leaning backwards. As soon as they lean backwards and go on their heels to carry heavy weights, and there's a huge amount of compression on the lumbar vertebrae, and as soon as I get them to kind of all other things being equal, okay, there are some reasons why this then doesn't work. You know, it gets like a little bit complex, but for quite a few people, once you get them used to even starting to get used to the idea of taking the weight forwards, and they don't really have that many back problems anymore. Okay. Yes. Okay. Right. So once you get on the front of the feet, what you're doing is you're engaging the fluid body. So this is one of my favorite sayings. There's a lot of misconceptions in the way that our culture thinks of the body, and one of them is that we have this skeleton which acts almost like a steel frame on a building, and it's the skeleton that takes all the weight. Well, actually, no. The skeleton provides shape, and what we have is it can take the weight. There's, you know, obviously, because that's how people use it. But also we have this fluid pressure in the body. And if you think of a plant growing through the ground and kind of coming up, that's not got a skeleton. It's purely fluid pressure that allows this little shoot to kind of grow through tarmac or concrete and push its way up. That's just fluid. So we have fluid as well. There is a bit of a debate really about whether muscles work literally by the cells pulling, or whether the cells, the fact that the cells shorten means that they also expand sideways, and they push the connective tissue envelopes that surround them out. So then you shorten the muscle because you're actually expanding the connective tissue, and then that shortens the muscle. So this is another way that muscles could work. It's probably a combination, but part of it is a manipulation of the fluid pressure in the muscle, and that mechanism would allow for the muscle being able to extend slightly as well, which if you do any sort of dance or martial arts or whatever, you know that limbs can extend further than you would think, and certainly further than they could if it was purely a contractile movement. So there's this expansive force. Okay. Now, okay, where are we? Yeah. So if you think of the skeleton as being like a pile of bricks, then you sit on the skeleton, you tend to go back onto the skeleton, onto the spine. And this is why discs compress and get damaged. So when you come forwards onto the balls of the feet, essentially what you're doing is you're coming off the skeleton and you're coming onto the fluid, and the abdomen is a big fluid compartment. So when the abdomen is pressurized because the muscles around the abdomen are switched on, then the abdomen is like a supportive fluid ball that then pushes down on the pelvis and therefore supports the ribs from below. So then there's no need to pull your shoulders back because the ribs are being pushed up. So then the upper body starts to be supported by this abdominal fluid pressure, which is why there's this feeling of buoyancy. Now, in order for that to happen, there's got to be a specific alignment of the lower body. So the way that gravity is moving through the body, the way that weight is being carried, changes from the one that we usually think of. Okay, so I had a set of anatomical drawings done. There's a graphics guy in Norwich who put these together for me. So um, so that red line is the line of weight bearing if you're on your heels, and the black line is the line of weight bearing if you're on the front of the feet. So if you look at where the red line goes, you'll notice that it goes through the sacroiliac joints. It completely misses the hip joint and the thigh bone, and then goes out of the heels. And then if you look at the black line, what happens is it goes straight through the femur, straight through the hip joint, and it goes in front of the sacroiliac joint. So this kind of explains an awful lot of things. You know, why do people get sciatica? Why do people get back pain? And so on. Because they are sitting on their heels all the time and moving on their heels all the time. And as soon as you bring the weight forwards, then so look again, the black line goes through the vertebral bodies, but actually it's also starting to come a little bit into the abdominal cavity, and so this is where you're yes, a little bit on the skeleton, but also there's that fluid pressure starting to come in. Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot of talk here, but this is actually meant to be experiential. And you can only get the idea of it really by putting it into practice and feeling the response of your body. Where are we? Okay, so I've talked about that. Yes, so here we go. So here's two. So if you look at those two diagrams, the only thing that I changed, I got him to draw, to use his graphic design program to draw somebody standing. And then the only thing he changed between those two people standing was the angle of the ankles. Everything else is the same. It's interesting how it looks so different. But all the other alignments of the head, the groin crease, the shoulders, the knees, none of that has been changed. All he did was rotate the whole thing around the ankles, and you get these two very different stances. Okay. So yeah, there we go. So there, that again, that blue line, you can see how it just completely misses the femur. So that's patently wrong. And the other thing that happens is people end up with a sense of straightness at the front of their body. So if you ask somebody how they know that their body's straight, their internal representation of that is basically the line of buttons on the front of the shirt. And that is not the front of the body. So if then you try and straighten yourself according to that line of buttons rather than something that's in the middle, the tendency is to go backwards on that curved line. And then the lumbar spine gets compressed. Yeah. So the center of the line of straightness of the body, there has to be an internal representation of that in the middle of the body, not the front. And this is, again, we're a very visually centered culture. So there's a tendency to kind of think with the eyes and your body is not the eyes. Okay. Yes, we've done that. I'm speeding through these because we've not got a huge amount of time. Yes. So in order for it to work, there's got to be a proper foundation, and the foundation requires that the feet are engaged more than is usual. So most people walk around. It's a lot to do with shoe design. I mean, particularly kind of modern kind of sports shoes. They've got padded soles and arch supports, so they encourage the use of the feet more like flippers instead of a muscular limb that engages. And and of course, you if you're running around and doing football and rugby or whatever and tennis, you'll be using your feet. But there has to be this idea. If it's quite interesting, one of the things I noticed doing the qigong is that wherever the attention goes and what your representation, your idea of what the body's doing, whatever that is, influences how the body actually works. So unless you actually have a sense that the feet are working, it's very easy for the feet not to work. uh, there is this very interesting feedback between attention and intention, which I apply a lot when I'm working with trauma. It's kind of this my main interest these days. But it definitely comes out here in terms of usage. So yes, and there's the angle of the groin crease. Again, we'll come to that. Okay, so yeah, so if you stand on your heels straight, what happens is the jaw is actually also not quite in the right line, and the jaw tends to kind of be sort of sit a little bit too far back. It strains the whole thing there. The thoracic cavity has to self-support. If you're on your heels, you have to deliberately engage your upper muscles, the back muscles, the pectorals, and whatever, in this military stance. So military stance is where you've disengaged the top of the body from the bottom of the body, and you're holding your ribs tense and stiff. Okay, and it looks great, but actually what's happened is the bottom, the feet and the legs, which should support the body, have been disengaged from the top, so it's having to support itself. And so there's this actually a very inefficient use of the body. Yeah, it compresses the lumbar spine. There we go. And I've just summarized it all on that slide. Yeah. Now, the other thing is that if you're on the heels and you try to engage your core muscles as you do in Pilates classes, it's incredibly difficult to engage them. If you stand on your heels, I don't know how many people are actually trying this out while I'm talking at home, but when if you stand on the heels, you'll find that actually there's no mechanical leverage by which the core muscles can be tightened. So you can artificially tighten them, but then you are tightening them deliberately rather than your body engaging them in a normal movement. And the problem with engaging any of the core muscles deliberately without some kind of opposing force to engage them against is that you can engage some of them but not others, and then the whole of the that core muscle system can end up out of balance. So one of my little bugbears is pelvic floor exercises. They're kind of okay, I'll tell you where this comes from. My partner used to be, before she retired, a Pilates teacher. And when she first trained, she was kind of going, I mean, she loved it. It was a great job. But when she first trained, after about 2 months, we're driving in the car and she says, "Oh, cry, my coccyx is really sore and I can't do anything about it. And it's getting really painful." So I had a talk with her about it. And then I realized what was going on. And showed her this. And what they've done in the Pilates teacher training is they've gone, yeah, you've actually got to learn how you can tighten your pelvic floor muscles, especially if you're a woman. Now, I don't know any cavemen who actually went out and did Pilates or cave women, but the women still managed to deliver babies really well because we're here. And the thing is, if the body has this slight forward balance, what happens is the core muscles engage themselves because of the mechanical leverage that's going on through the abdomen. And they don't engage in some random fashion, they engage evenly. Whereas if you just deliberately tighten one lot, you end up with one lot tight, and other parts of the whole kind of core muscular system is not being worked so hard. And then it just starts to get out of balance. And yeah, coccyx pain is just one of the knock-on effects. So when you lean slightly forwards, it automatically switches on. And you can, if you're, I do this with people in a seated position as well. I'll kind of show you that in a second. How are we doing for time, John? I've not got a clock in front of me. If you can, I can't hear you.
Yeah, no, sorry. Just yeah, we got another 20 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. So I'll whiz through the rest. Okay, so if we keep the legs straight but not locked, the body's got a nice balance, and then we come onto the feet, and the feet are engaged. And I'll talk a little bit more. So when they're engaged, then the ball of the foot, not the toes, but the ball of the foot engages the ground. And then you get this line of gravity that goes through the femur, through the hip joint. And the jaw is then sitting in a more balanced position. The abdominal cavity, the core muscles engage. So if you think of Tom Myers, it's the deep frontal line, okay? That engages, and then the ribs are supported from below, and then the breathing's a lot easier because those muscles around the ribs are not switched on quite so much. So the lungs actually can expand a bit more. Okay. And yeah, and you can practice this actually by sitting down. If you sit down, you can get the idea of what goes on. Doing it standing is more tricky because it's surprising how, as I say, how tricky it is to get this this groin crease right. Now, okay, so why are ski boots like ski boots? Well, what ski boots do is they force somebody to bend at the groin. Most people, if they bend down, use their knees way too much, so the knees go over the toes. And once your knees extend over your toes, then the knee joint is overstrained. Now, you will see, Shaolin martial artists putting their knees like way forwards, but they spend years and years strengthening their tendons and ligaments so they can do that. And most people walking around do not have that level of disciplined exercise and energetic exercise which strengthens their tendons and ligaments to that extent. So actually, for most people, the natural position for the knees is more or less over the base of the toes. And once you're in that position, then it's possible to, if you're sitting down, then it's possible to lean forwards, and you can stand up really easily because you're able to push forwards. So if you look at that position, the heels are slightly back, the thighs are sloped down, so you need to be on a slightly high chair. And if you get a nice balance where you're on your sitting bones and nice and vertical, looking straight forwards, so you're not looking up or down, eyes level, and then you keep the same neck and spinal alignment, and you rotate around the hip joint, so the whole body hinges forwards, and then that is supported by the ball of the feet by just engaging the feet muscles very slightly. Okay, so then what will happen is you'll feel your core muscles will switch themselves on without any need to do anything. And once that happens, you'll feel that there's a connection from the feet up into the upper body. And now connective tissue isn't, again, it's not like steel. It doesn't switch on straight away. So you might have to wait 2, 3, 5, 10, up to 15 seconds for your connective tissue to engage. Okay, for most people it's 3 or 4 seconds, but it can be a bit longer, can be a little bit shorter. It's not immediate. And then something will start to happen. And once one thing engages, your body won't be used to that. So then it'll then adapt to that and then re-engage a little bit. So you can get some quite interesting things happen just by starting off from this seated position. So the critical thing, as I say, is you go back to the ski boots, and those boots, they make it so that the ankles can't bend, and then the knees can't go forwards, and then you have to bend at the hip. So this is again about training that bend point and recognizing that the hip joint is also a flexing joint, not just the knees and the ankles. Okay, there we go. She's gone forwards, but her feet are a little bit too far forwards there. It's very difficult getting someone to get in exactly the right position. Yeah, and most people, when I say sort of like, engage your feet, they look down at the floor because they've got to check the feet from the outside. So you kind of have to kind of get into a somatic mindset to do this, and feeling the body from the inside rather than having to being externally referenced and have to experience the body from the outside. Interoception, yes, actually feeling it on the inside rather than looking at yourself. Okay, yes, here's that. Yes, so and again, another common one is the hips pushed forward, too far forwards. And again, if the hips are pushed too far forwards, then what it does is all that mechanical linkage gets lost. And again, it's very difficult getting the mechanical force from your feet into the upper body. So if the hips are too far back, then you're walking like a duck, and if the and you may be engaging your core muscles, but it's not really very balanced or elegant. And then if you push the hips too far forwards, then there's this compression in the lower back, and again, all the mechanical advantage is lost. So there's this so most people kind of compensate way too far one way and then the other and then the other. So getting that angle exactly right is quite tricky. And again, I think this goes back to Reich and all of the psychological part of this body alignment. Okay, we'll skip through these. Yes, so feet. So engaging the feet. Now, again, most people think of the longitudinal arch as being the main arch of the foot. The way it actually works is the transverse arch is the primary arch. And if the transverse arch is strong, then the longitudinal arch is automatically strong. You don't need to do anything with it. And the transverse arch becomes strong by the foot muscles being used. Okay, and it's not like you're going into kind of grabbing the ground, but it's just kind of switching on. Yeah, so just switch on. Yeah, so those muscles are just engaged. Okay, and that's all that's necessary. And then the weight comes on them and they're engaged. So the foot isn't a flipper. Then the arch strengthens itself, and then you'll feel that the longitudinal arch just kind of lifts a little bit. Feet parallel, hip width apart. It's very martial arty and Qigong-y. The usual one is to stand with the feet out. Yeah. if the feet are out, then you kind of, if you come forwards, you're falling into a hole. So the feet are, the natural position of the feet is actually forwards. And there we go. So once you get exactly the right alignment, then there's this force goes down into the ground from the feet. The legs feel extremely strong and powerful. And then there's this light buoyancy in the upper body. So the upper body actually lengthens because the spine decompresses, because this fluid pressure in the abdomen is supporting the upper body. So I quite often, when I get into this, I gain about 1/4 of an inch, sometimes 1/2 an inch of extra height, which is nice at my age, because my body is decompressing. And again, you see this alignment. You know, professional athletes do this all the time. So heels. So that is a dog on its heels. If you look at a comparative anatomy, and so dogs and kangaroos, if they're on their heels, they're static. And if you look at every animal that moves, then it's not on its heel. It's on the ball of the foot, or if you get a horse, it's actually on the ends of its toes. Okay, but the heel is for rest. And okay, probably not time to go into details of this. I quite often get people to put their fingers on their groin crease when they're doing this exercise of coming forwards, because then you can feel with your hands as well what the muscles there are doing. So it can be quite useful. So she's bringing the weight onto the feet, which you can only do if the heels are slightly back from the knees. Okay, so she's got them onto the feet. So you now see the legs start to unfold. Knees still a little bit bent, and the body's now again. Yeah, she's ballet trained, and she's been trained to have a big lordosis of the lower back. So she's tending to go into that slightly over bent lordosis straight away, which is, yeah. But this is fairly close. And yeah, it's fairly close. It's essentially because she's been trained to have this curvature of the back with the dance training, incorrect dance training. It's hard for her to fully engage the front of the feet on the ground and support the upper body. It's surprising how long it takes to undo training. That's missed the mark a little bit. And what else do we say about this? Yes, so when again, when you get this buoyancy, then you start to feel a clarity around the eyes, because the whole body starts to energize as well. It's quite an interesting state. And there's this kind of alchemic thing to it. And we've probably covered the rest of it's kind of just blurb, really. Okay. Questions, probably best for questions. Yes.
Great, thank you. So Linda was asking about how you can build up safely. I mean, when I got a pair of barefoot shoes and decided to go on holiday and did a lot of walking around Washington, D.C. And after a couple of days, I started getting this intense shoulder pain.
Yes.
I had no reason for it at all.
Yes.
And I realized it was probably because my whole relationship to gravity changed at that point, you know? And I guess I was probably walking more on my heels because there was no support for it. So I don't know, but it was interesting. So
yeah. So you're used to engaging your upper body muscles because you're not supported through the abdomen from the feet. So then what happens is when you go onto flat shoes, then the shoes change the alignment of part of your body, but you've still got the old habits of using the upper body muscles. So then they're overworking, and there can be all kinds of things going on. So in order to convert, you start off. Maybe I do a full webinar on this and actually do demonstrations
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we do something on this next year because it's not it's not simple. There's a few ways to approach it. One is from the seated position and learning to use the hip joints properly. And then the other one is this basic qigong practice of bouncing on the heels. You can see a few demonstrations on one or two of the Eight Silk Brocade qigong videos on YouTube. I never did this as an Eight Silk Brocade exercise. I learned this as part of a whole as a very specific qigong practice. But bouncing on the heels is a general. It's used in qigong for general health. It builds up general. It's a very kind of shotgun health practice. Okay, and whereas a lot of the qigong is about activating particular meridians in particular sequences, but this is quite different. And as I say, my sense is it's quite alchemic. So you stand. You start off on your heels because that's the easiest, most familiar place, and you stand straight in an unaffected sort of way with your eyes looking at the horizon, not up or down. And then you engage your feet and your hands, so you switch them on. The hands are hanging loosely at the side, but arms are hanging loosely at the side, but you switch your hands on, so you engage the muscles very slightly so that they're not floppy and they're not stiff. The muscles are switched on. And when you do that, there should be this sense of a slight gap between the long bones, and the same with the feet. Okay, and then that engagement switches something on. You'll feel it. Again, you can feel as the eyes get a little bit sort of slightly more bright. And then you start to bounce quite quickly using the ball of the foot. So your weight's got to shift forwards. And you don't use the knees. If your knees are bending when you do this, it's wrong. So all of the movement comes from the feet. And so you're using the long, thin muscles in the anterior and middle compartments of your lower leg, which then go down as tendons into the feet. And so what happens is that there's a tendency to use the gastrocnemius and soleus instead of those long, thin muscles. So then what happens is those big muscles at the back of the calf start to ache because they're being used for what they aren't to be used for. And you just ignore them, basically. And you keep bouncing lightly, so it's quite a quick bounce. Every time your heels hit the ground, then think of that as almost like all of the weight of your body is going down into the ground. Every time your heels strike the ground, all of your weight goes down into the ground. So then you're left weightless, and you look for buoyancy. The most important bit is you start to become aware of the possibility of buoyancy in the upper chest. And as soon as you become aware of that, you focus on that. So one of the basic principles of working with the body is you focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. So if you become interested in the buoyancy, then the buoyancy begins to expand, and your body responds to that by reorganizing itself around that buoyancy. And then the exercise starts to take off. Initially, if you get past 5 minutes, you'll be very lucky. Really, you'll be crawling around after 5 minutes. Because those muscles in the lower legs are so weak compared to the rest of your body, because they're just underused. And so that's a good start. But yeah, we need to probably do a demonstration video and
Yeah,
do
that'd be great.
that way. And okay.
Andrew, I don't know if you've seen a book. It's been out for a while by Esther Gokal. I think, don't know how you pronounce her name, but anyway, it was about healthy back, and it looks at the history of the skeleton and the lower back, and she shows quite a lot of pictures of sort of indigenous cultures and how they stand. And there's a quite a amazing one of a tribe in the Amazon, and they're most of them are standing with their feet slightly splayed. And I'm wondering about that because that's something that when you walk with your feet towards the front, I mean, it can be a little bit artificial.
Ah, but they don't walk like that.
Oh,
Well,
no, they stand like that.
well,
Oh, I see
yeah,
what you're saying. Yes, they stand
yes, they
like
stand
that.
like that.
Yes.
Now, you see, if you look at them walk, you see, if you're a hunter-gatherer, you want to make no noise when you walk.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make no noise? Well, you feel your way along the
Mm-hmm.
ground, and you can't feel your way with your heels. You put the front of the foot down. The weight. It's a Tai Chi walk essentially. The weight remains on the back foot. You feel the ground in front of you without putting weight on it. And then if that feels okay, then you bring the weight onto the ball of the foot and you push very slightly with the back foot, and then the weight comes onto the ball of the foot, and then you're ready to drop, and then the weight goes down into the ground, and then you can lift that leg up and put it wherever you want and put it down.
Yeah.
So with a bit of practice, that walk gets faster, but essentially it's this front of the foot walking. And once you start to get into that front of the foot walking, yes, I mean you can go in any direction, but the once you start to do the exercise in a static position and sitting, you need to have the feet in a formal horse riding stance because there's all sorts of things that have to be in place to kind of get. It's about getting the right experience of the engagement.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
slight.
that's what I mean. That's what cats do,
Yeah,
or lions, don't they?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The way they do that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
I was interested in the psychological aspect to this as well, like the kind of military pose. I read somewhere also that when you because we did this at school many years ago, learning to march, for example,
Yeah.
something in that thing about marching, which seems to be designed to kind of disconnect you
Yes.
from your
Yes.
heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In
It
the
does.
same way that probably those kind of military postures do as well,
Yes.
standing in that kind of posture.
Yeah. Again, if you think of Tom Myers' kind of deep frontal line, because what you're doing is you're disconnecting the deep frontal line when
Mm-hmm.
when you do this. And so the deep frontal line includes all of the internal thoracic musculature, including the pericardium. So if so if you lock up the upper, or the middle third of the deep frontal line, then essentially you're also locking up the pericardium.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Interesting.
yeah. Uh, yeah, and I had some really interesting experiences as well with heart, becoming more heart connected um, on those camps, and
Mm.
um, yeah, it's hard to put anything down to one particular cause, but
Mm.
um, because there was a lot of community there as well, and the thing about uh, heart connection, we are fundamentally communal, social animals, and um, marching's a peculiar thing. There are natural rhythms. So if you get a professional musician playing, they're not playing like a metronome.
Mm-hmm.
You
No,
know,
no,
you
no.
get you know you get all the the great jazz pianists and whatever, and even classical musicians, they don't play like a metronome. There are these tiny little variations, and the tiny little variations this has been studied quite a lot, and they're to do with heart rate variability
No, you're right, Andrew. It's actually, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that separately, about harmonies and rhythm, because nowadays, because I'm a musician myself, nowadays most of what people listen to on the radio is loops. It's
Yes.
computer generated, so it's absolutely on the nail. There's no variation in it at all, and I wonder what actually that does to one's physiology and one's heart. When you're listening
no
to
heart
that,
in it.
when you're listening to that day in and day out, because it's
No
not,
heart in it. No.
and the whole, as you say, the whole thing about live music is that the beauty is in the variations.
Yes.
And
those variations they're in the order of a thousandth of a second.
Yeah.
But they're still there, and these tiny little shifts in rhythmicity. So the rhythm still feels even, but it has these tiny little subliminal shifts in it, because which are related to your heart rate variability, which are related to your emotional relational state.
Yes.
And they're really powerful.
Essentially, when I was they at Waterloo, Waterloo Station, they used to play at peak times. They used to play faster marching type music because they wanted to move people along, and it actually worked. It worked really well. So everyone would sort of start walking much faster to get to their trains.
The markets do it kind of medium pace, so you kind of have time to browse the shelves.
Yes, exactly. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. It'd be lovely to have you back, Andrew. And I know you've got another part of your course coming up.
Yes, that's right.
As well. So have a look on eHealth Learning for that too. Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Okay, we've got loads of see a chat. Oh dear.
It's they're not questions. They're just comments and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, thank you very much, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.